That's some invite there, something. Didn't think I got much.
I'd like to call the General Plan Working Group meeting to order for Thursday, June 1st, 2023. Can we have roll call, please?
Chairman Walt Stanish.
Here.
Vice Chair Lisa Hetchman. Here. Edwin Okamura.
Here.
Tom Donnelly.
Here.
Emmett Holtzander.
Here.
Judith Adamson. Here. Art Darden. Absent. Rick Dolk. Absent. Lisa Duke. Here.
Can you all join me at the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, next up is public comment. We don't have anybody here. Is there anybody online? Okay, then I'll close public comment. Action items, approval of the minutes of May 4th, 2023. Do we have any comments on them before we approve them? Anybody? Okay. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes of May 4th, 2023?
I'll make a motion. We approve the minutes as submitted.
Thank you, Tom. And-
I'll second.
Okay. Can we take a vote, please?
Chairman Walt Stanish.
Yes.
Vice Chair Lisa Hetchman.
Yes.
Edwin Okamura.
Yes.
Tom Donnelly.
Yes.
Emmett Holtzander.
Yes.
Judith Adamson.
Yes.
All right. Next on the agenda is discussion. 4.1, draft Rio Vista bicycle and pedestrian improvements. Oh, you're up.
Good evening, Chair, members of the working group. We can go ahead and advance through these first few slides. Keep going. Yeah, this is great. This evening, our first item is going to be Carly Hoyt with Fair and Peers reporting on what they found through their investigations, community outreach, and planning efforts for bicycle and pedestrian planning. So at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Carly, and Carly, just let us know when you'd like the slide advanced.
Okay, can you all hear me okay?
Yes, great.
Great. Thank you for having me. So yeah, Carly Hoyt with Fair and Peers. So tonight we'll be going over kind of an overview of the previous active transportation planning efforts that will basically serve as the baseline for future bike and ped improvements. We'll also go over comments received at the General Plan Public Workshop from January, discuss potential additional connections that maybe should be added to kind of some of those previous planning efforts, and then wrap up with near-term and long-term priorities as well as next steps. So next slide. So first, I just want to note that as I'm going through kind of these planning efforts, all of this information is derived from the documents that we've received and reviewed. So if any of you are aware of any other information or discussions that occurred kind of during these various plan developments, then please let us know. Feel free to share. Okay, next slide. So first is the Rio Vision report, which is a cooperative effort to strategically assess opportunities in Rio Vista, and it included multiple design-related concepts aimed at improving active transportation in the city, and really focused on improving walkability and good pedestrian design, increasing visibility for bicyclists and pedestrians, creating a full connected network throughout the city, discussed bike parking, and managing parking demand in downtown. Next slide. So this was a screenshot basically from the report. I apologize if it's a little bit blurry on your end. The reason we wanted to show it is because it basically shows the bike and trail plan throughout the city. And as I mentioned, it really shows very clearly a full connection throughout Rio Vista, both on Highway 12 and north and ultimately south of Highway 12. So we feel like that's important for the bike ped discussion tonight. What's next? So we also wanted to mention the Caltrans SHOT project, part of which is underway. The SHOT project was divided into 3 segments. Segment 1 is currently under construction. Segment 2 is the Somerset to Druin Drive. And segment 3 is Druin to the county line. Segments 2 and 3 are basically completing the design phase. They're about 95 to 100% plan set completion, and they're in the utility and right-of-way acquisition phase. Caltrans anticipates construction beginning in 2024 for segment 2 and possibly 2024 or 2025 for segment 3. Unfortunately, we weren't able to get the full design plans, the final ones. They're not ready for public review quite yet, but we are just going to highlight during this presentation a few of the project components using screenshots from a previous presentation that Caltrans and STA gave to the city of Rio Vista in 2022. So next. So this is showing Church Road and SR 12. This intersection in particular came up multiple times during the public workshop for various safety concerns, speed concerns, and ultimately part of the improvements will be a eastbound left turn lane, a westbound right turn lane, and then a southbound receiving lane, an acceleration lane for the southbound right turn. There's also going to be bike lanes on the shoulders, and then channelizers in the middle. So next slide. This is showing the improvements between Druin and Front Street. On the south side of 12, between Druin and Hillside Terrace, there would be a Class 2 bike lane and sidewalks until that intersection. On the north side, this will be a Class 4 separated bikeway with sidewalks there. And then west or east of the intersection will be all Class 4 separated bikeways. There will also be 2 new rectangular rapid flashing beacons at the Gardner Way and Virginia Drive intersections. Next slide. This is just showing a cross section of what that section, the segment 3 will look like. So you can see the sidewalks, the street trees, lights, and then the bikeway, the vehicular travel lane, and the center turn lanes. Next. The next planning document is the Rio Vista Active Transportation Plan, which was adopted by STA in 2020. And it included a thorough existing conditions analysis, which basically just documented that there were very few bike facilities within the city and pretty extensive gaps in the sidewalk coverage. It identified a backbone bike and ped network based on high demand routes, and it was intended to promote crosstown connectivity and maximize curb to curb right of way. Next slide. So this is showing the proposed bikeway and connected. It's a connected all ages and abilities route is what they labeled it as. So the green would be the Class 1 multi-use path, which would be for bicyclists and pedestrians. And as you can see, kind of consistent with that Rio Vision document, the goal really is to provide a fully connected network throughout the city. Next slide. You can go one more. So now we'll talk about general plan public workshop and some of the comments that were received. So we had 2 sessions. Fair and Peers had 4 different boards, and 3 of these focused specifically on active transportation. So next slide. I'll just show some pictures of the different boards and then I'll summarize everything at the end. But basically this board was asking what the experience really is traveling in Rio Vista. We had stickers for driving, biking, walking, and transit. So the first question was asking, how safe do you feel traveling in Rio Vista? And we asked residents to, place each applicable mode under whatever level of comfort they felt. So you can see in the session 1 board on the right, for instance, bike is very clearly marked as the very unsafe category. And then the second question was how efficient is traveling in Rio Vista by each mode? And then the third question was if travel was safer and more efficient, what would your preferred travel mode be? Next slide. This board, we asked residents to identify locations that they avoid walking or biking and that they enjoy walking and biking. We initially started with stickers and then we were having some trouble with those sticking. So in the second board, we just had people use red or green markers to indicate which areas they enjoy and which areas they avoid. Next slide. And then lastly, we asked residents to identify, just with sticky notes, areas of concern or recommended improvements. We got a lot of great feedback from everyone and overall had a pretty good turnout. So on these boards, for instance, the Church Road intersection was mentioned multiple times as an area of concern. So next slide. So additional key takeaways: between 58 and 67% of respondents felt that lack of bike or ped facilities make walking and biking difficult. They indicated they would walk or bike more if there were more facilities. Most residents feel safe walking, but feel neutral or very unsafe biking. Many feel walking and biking is inefficient, and walking, biking, and driving were pretty evenly noted as the preferred travel mode if travel was safer and more efficient in the city. The least favorite places, or the favorite places to walk were Airport Road between Liberty Island and Church, Somerset Drive and Trilogy, River Road, which I'll touch on in a second. It came up on both sides, the Promenade, and then major roads around Summit. The least favorite places to walk or bike included Highway 12, St. Francis, River Road again, and then Airport between Church and River Road and Church Road. And River Road was noted both as a favorite and a least favorite because basically multiple people indicated that they enjoyed walking or biking because of the views, but they did feel that there was poor facilities. So they didn't like that part of it. Okay, so next slide. So now we'll just talk about some potential bike and ped connections that could possibly be added to some of this work that has already been done. So one more. So this is essentially the bike and ped network from the ATP, but we made some additions. So we added the dotted purple and blue lines. And these are really more based on some of the site plans through some of these entitlements that we saw, making sure we're documenting potential connections through some of these future planned neighborhoods. There's one connection from the Somerset Drive to the Amorator or Church Road south of 12 location. And I'm not aware of any entitlements or project applications there, but we wanted to note it so that way if in the future an application does come in, that kind of gives a little bit of leverage and helps facilitate a discussion to ensure that there is a connection with that development. We've also identified 2 potential grade separated crossing locations, and all of this is flexible. So this is really what we're hoping to get your opinion on tonight. If you see anything that should be moved, removed, added, now is the best time to let us know. So for the grade separated crossings, we have one just by the bridge and then one in between Church and Druin. And I know that there was some previous discussions about possibly adding that into a shop project. I'm not sure I think the shop project, it's my understanding, is too far along at this time to really incorporate something like that. But this is still the appropriate time and place to identify if that is something that the city wants to provide direction on, because that will help facilitate future conversations by adding it into the general plan circulation element. So with that, I will pause and I would love any feedback, direction, comments that you guys have.
Okay, I got a couple. For one, that grade separation there between Church and Druin is part of our current general plan. So it's been in there on the books for 20 years. So that's not a new piece of information there. The second thing with the circulation plan, I don't see that there's a path that's shown that's going like directly to the high school. I don't know what that path might be, but I think that would be important to somehow try to connect the bicycle paths in a path toward that school.
Okay.
That was all I had.
Okay. Edwin speaking. Isn't that dotted blue line into the high school over here, up here?
No, that's like Amador Circle.
Oh, got it.
that
Right.
area.
It's not showing the school. And so one comment you had mentioned on the shop project, and it's been on our circulation plan for 20 years, as Donnelly had mentioned. It's I want to say the Church. It's midway between Highway 12, or 3/4 of the way from Somerset down to downtown. And there's going to be a culvert put in by STA or Caltrans. And we had talked about making that larger, and I've been talking to the equity group and the active transportation group about making that happen, but I don't know if this group has any play or position to make with STA. I'm trying to get as many bodies or people to say things about it, because it's been on our general plan for 20 something odd years, and they ignored it. So there's going to be a culvert I talked about in the last meeting.
Could we clarify, is that undercrossing as it's shown on the map, that is that in the location we're discussing, or?
That's correct. You have a dot. There's a black
And-
gray
and there's
dot on
a
there.
Fairly significant drainage that.
That's
passes
correct.
Through there.
I mean, it would probably have to be at least 8 feet, that culvert, but we would want it to be larger.
It's one of the vertical curves that they're looking to flatten out anyway, so there's going to be significant earth movement that happens and they're going to have to deal with the drainage there. So we're just asking for them to enlarge that and make allowance for lighting and such, so it can be a safe passageway.
I think that Carly has. Okay. I think that Carly has spoken with Caltrans about the status of construction drawings. They're pretty far along. I also believe that what we'd be looking at would actually be raising the road somewhat.
Well, they are going to raise the road already. So
Okay.
it's just a matter of the size of that culvert that they're putting in.
And
I don't think it would change the structure of the highway and what they're doing there. It's just a matter of how large what goes in underneath it.
okay. We'll continue to look at it. I know that I did speak with Robin Bore, Public Works Director, and her understanding is that that location is planned for an overcrossing, not an undercrossing. I don't know if anybody can
What does that
confirm
mean?
that. A pedestrian overcrossing raised up, up the ramp or stairs, and
Really? Huh?
That's the first I'm hearing of it.
That's the
too.
first any of us are hearing of that.
that's what Robin had shared with me. So we do need to look into that a little bit more. Carly, can you share with us anything that you learned from Caltrans about the status of plans and the ability to accommodate that undercrossing?
Yeah, so based on my conversation, and it was a brief conversation with Caltrans, but it sounded like because the design plans for this section they're already essentially complete, and they're really in the utility and right-of-way acquisition phase. They indicated that changing the project at this time could actually put them at risk for losing funding, that they've already requested an extension of funding once on the project. And it may sound simple to just make the culvert a little bit bigger, but depending on what the right of way or depending on really utilities and what else is out there right now, a small change, or what may seem like a small change like that, could actually have a fairly large impact on the project itself. So from the call that I had, it sounded like it might not be feasible at this time to incorporate it in with the shop project, but Caltrans was not opposed to it in the future. And so that's where, at least again, just from the conversation that I had, so that's where making sure that it's very clear within
We're not
this
laughing
general
at
plan.
you.
Oh, no, that's okay.
We're
Just-
laughing at STA because that's BS.
Yeah, well, and ultimately, I think it would be a conversation, for the city. If you want to continue that conversation, that would be something for city staff to continue with Caltrans. But as far as what we can do for you here now, it really would be clearly identifying this again. And I know it's obviously been identified in the past and brought up in the past, but we'll also talk about priorities next after we finish this. And so if this is really the biggest priority that the working group wants to provide, then now again is the time to say that, and then we can help craft language in the general plan to make sure that that is something that is focused on in the near term.
Okay.
Yeah.
Also, it looks like from Somerset, I don't notice very much difference between the new one and the old one, but I do notice that out of Somerset, there's that blue dotted line. Is that a new component?
South of it,
Uh,
south of 12.
South, yes, south of 12 coming out of Somerset Drive.
Yeah, so that's one that we added. And like I said, I'm not aware of actually any entitlement applications, but we just put it in at this point because that does give a little bit of leverage in the future if an application comes in to request some type of bike ped facility or connection. And I also want to note with these lines, oftentimes when these get added, and as a project comes through, it's not necessarily saying that is exactly, how that connection is going
Sure.
to look a lot of times it'll kind of meander through the site, and it may vary depending on what the project is, but it really just helps facilitate that conversation and ensures that some type of a connection goes into that project during the design phase.
Thank you.
I think it's important to acknowledge that that's on Flannery property now.
Mhm.
Right.
So the initial solution will be using the bike lane that's on Highway 12. As far as bicycle, I don't believe that the sidewalks extend that far up. I think the sidewalks stop at Druin. So there would not be a pedestrian facility, but then there would be a bicycle facility on the south side of 12 that would go into town. And that would be the initial solution until something happens on Flannery that we either can negotiate the right to construct a trail, development comes in, something. So. Carly, can you confirm? I think that the purple dotted lines are following roads. Is that correct?
Correct, yeah. So
Um,
we separated to potential on-street versus potential off-street. And again, these are just based on the site plans that I saw for these entitlement applications. And yeah.
And so in the case of the Del Rio Hills project, which is south of 12, there is a purple spur that comes down. That's a future road. The other roads are existing, are they not?
The further south road, I think, is it Santa Clara, I want to call it, or is that the one you're referencing?
Yeah,
That connects to Montezuma?
Yes.
Yes, yeah.
So regardless of Flannery, we could
so.
have a connection out on the south side of 12 that would wrap around through Montezuma Hills and would be an alternative loop. That's a feasible project without Flannery participation, right?
Yes, in that project, it wasn't clear from the site plan that I saw, but it looked like there might be some potential road realignment. I believe that this is gated off currently, this road, and anyone feel free to correct me if I'm
So-
wrong, but I don't
I-
think it's publicly accessible. But with that proposed project, I think I saw some realignment. And ultimately there was quite a bit of development along the north side of that roadway.
Well,
Planned.
Amaretta is you could drive onto that road at dead ends, but I'm not sure where it makes a sharp left turn that there's a road there. I'm not
That's the one I
familiar.
think is gated. Yeah.
So we
it must be
probably
dirt.
need to do a little bit of investigation about where right of way exists. Because I don't think we expect anything to happen with Flannery, but we want to look at the opportunities where we actually can create connections now and ones that we might want to create with future participation. The other project that is approved but not yet built is the Riverwalk project, Sino. And what we've shown there is alignments that are within the proposed project, and they would be enhanced roads with pedestrian bicycle features. But one thing to keep in mind regarding that undercrossing is right now there's nothing on either side of it. You can't get to it from the north side and you can't get to it from the south side. So that may be, it may make it more challenging to motivate STA and Caltrans to construct a feature when there's no physical way to get there and no immediate plans for development. So. Yeah.
Is there a reason why that blue dot that's coming out of Somerset couldn't go down along the wall of Somerset? So down on the north side of 12, come down to Church? Instead of out in a field that is currently being farmed?
Would make more sense that way.
Just come down, as you'd be coming down along the wall, and you could essentially get, I believe, all the way to Church. Maybe you'd have trouble, I can't remember where the Marks place is exactly, but I think you could get all the way to at least Church if you went on the north side of 12.
You could, you just hit the mark.
Parallel that purple line that
Mhm.
goes through.
Yeah.
Harley, did you understand that?
I think I heard, so on the north side of 12 between Somerset and Church, basically just like in between Trilogy, is that where we're referencing?
Yes.
Okay,
I think you're talking about along Highway 12 though, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
mhm.
Yeah,
Okay.
along that wall, there's plenty of space up to the Marks property
Yeah,
and
the
then
Mar-
there's,
yeah,
you'd
the
have
Marks
to get
one
an
was the only
easement
one.
across there.
okay, so adding an additional line on that north side.
Thank you. I couldn't remember if the Marks was north or south of Church off the top of my head.
It is, it is west of church.
I have a question about that other separated grade area by the bridge. Where is that exactly? I can't picture it in my mind that it would be such a big difference for pedestrians and bikes there.
It'd be on the side of Front Street. So basically, this is the general location. Just kind of looking at Front Street right now, and this has been done in a lot of other areas where there's kind of a bridge with this type of configuration. The column spacing, so there's not enough room on Front itself to really accommodate super intense pedestrian and bike facilities, but a lot of times there will be a separate just undercrossing in like the column directly adjacent to it that serves kind of more as like just a bike ped tunnel. And so this is another potential location for a crossing. And again, this is all just our placement. So if you don't think that that would be a practical location, when we were looking at this, we were looking at the connection really from airport to River Road and then down. And so that would just provide a safe way to get under the bridge that's designated specifically for bikes and peds.
My only comment would be if you're going under the bridge a little bit more, people coming out, I don't know whether the cars would pay as much attention to them if they were right on the side of them.
Well, ideally, we have the secondary, you can see kind of the dashed or the dotted blue line that ultimately we have it connecting to a future class 1 multi-use path. So ideally, especially if redevelopment actually occurs in this area, there would be a fully separated bike ped facility. So it wouldn't just be, directly crossing under the bridge and then hopping right back onto the road. It would be a legitimate path that's fully separated.
Okay.
I'm not sure who utilizes that land on the north side of the bridge. Is Caltrans staging out of there? So I think what I've always envisioned is that closer to the river between the columns, there would be a separate connection for pedestrians and bicyclists.
Right, and I think Robin is actually working on that where there's going to be a flashing light and a crosswalk over there. And they're trying to get an easement across that Triguero track. That's right next to Egbert Field.
Yeah,
Yes.
I think I saw in the last HSIP funding round that the Rio Vista project was selected, if I'm not misremembering, for a RRFB in that location, I believe.
Awesome. And then the class 4 separated bikeway on River Road. What is class 4? I guess it's exactly that, separated bikeway.
It's a buffered bikeway. So separated from the travel lane. So the class 2 is really when it's just striped along the roadway. You really just have paint to separate you from cars, where the class 4 is a fully separated with some type of typically a vertical, whether it's trees, landscape, deflectors, something like that.
Okay, and when you say it's a class 4 separated bikeway, it also accommodates pedestrian?
Class 4 separated is just for bikes. The class 1 multi-use path would accommodate pedestrians. So if things happen there, you would need to add sidewalks for pedestrians.
Well, we probably need that as a class 1 because there's pedestrians or children that walk from along River Road from development on the other side of Airport Road.
Okay.
Carly, could you clarify what a class 4 would eventually be accompanied by a separated sidewalk, right?
Correct.
So you would have the class 4 on the same plane as the road, but that's also a walking sidewalk.
Yeah.
Okay,
Because
so,
you're not mixing bikes and peds.
but
No.
class 4 represents both, or do we need to designate that on here?
Sorry, go ahead.
I think that's a good point, that we should acknowledge that there would also be a pedestrian facility. It's not solely a bike facility.
Yeah, so the class 4 is specifically a bikeway. It really would come into things like design standards or other city policies and design guidelines that would say to add kind of the sidewalks with the street section. But that is a good differentiator. So I'm making a note of that right now, and we'll figure out if there's an easy way to either add it visually to this or some other way it will be clearly identified in the circulation element that sidewalks along these portions are kind of priority areas.
If this is potential, why can't we just call it class one multi-use?
If that's something that you wanted, you could. The distinction is if the class one really is bikes and peds mixing. So if for some reason like bicyclists wanted to be able to, drive faster, they didn't want to have it be a shared facility, then that's why sometimes the class 4 bikeway is preferred in certain locations. But we can definitely change that to a class 1 if that separation is not necessary.
I would agree with that. And then what side of the road would it be on? Would it be on the riverside or would it be on the land side?
That would vary depending on a lot of things. So we would need to look into that more, depending on kind of the existing right of way and adjacent developments. So we can look into that.
I mean, if I had a preference, I'd rather have it on the riverside personally.
Okay.
Well, a class 4 path wouldn't be bi-directional. Wouldn't you have class 4 on each side or?
Class 4 would be each side, but I think,
Okay.
were you indicating that you wanted a class 1?
Yeah, that's what we,
That,
Okay.
and that would make a lot of sense to
Yeah.
have it on the river.
Yeah,
side.
to just
Sure,
put
right.
one side.
Yeah.
Okay.
We should have a swim lane there too.
high tide.
I hate to bring it up or even ask, but has Caltrans decided exactly what they're doing at Virginia? Yeah,
The
there's
crosswalk?
their crosswalk or whatever it is they're planning.
Yeah, it's crosswalk.
Yeah.
That's one thing that's still being discussed for sure.
Mhm.
We bring it up at
I
every
just
single
see
meeting.
that as a accident waiting to happen.
Mhm.
Oh, yeah.
Multi-car accident.
I just brought it
And
up at the last
pedestrian.
STA meeting again.
That's gonna be a mess.
Did you understand that comment, Carly?
I did, yes, I am noting it. As far as I am aware, the RRFB is still in the plan, but like I said, we didn't get finalized plans for these sections because they are not ready for public review yet. But based on the presentation, that is the last I saw, that was still included in the plan.
Mm-mm.
Right into pedestrians.
Yep.
And I guess I'll just add, I know it's kind of a lot to think about and talk about. So if any of you have any additional thoughts on this, I'd say maybe within the next week or so, feel free to send things to Nick or Paul, and they can forward them to us, and then we can obviously incorporate as necessary.
Any additional comments on bike and ped planning?
All right. So
Carly,
then,
thank you so much.
yeah, there are just two more sections. One is, the last one is really just talking about priorities. Based on what you have seen, you can go to the next slide as well. We have this kind of broken out into 3 buckets, and it's really just near term, midterm, and long-term priorities. So just wanted to see if at this point, the working group does have anything immediate that stands out, or direction that you would like us to include. So examples of the near term, like I said, I saw that the city had been selected for some HSIP funding. So I think there were a couple of bike improvements on Airport, and then one was, I think, Norman Richards. And then there was some various crosswalk facilities that were also selected improvements. So if there are certain connections that right now you feel are really important and should be prioritized, that would be helpful for us to know, because we can note that in the circulation element. And then, over the next 0 to 5 years, that way the city would have direction to really focus on, providing whatever, if there's a gap in the network, or if an undercrossing or a grade separated crossing is a priority and you want them to immediately start exploring that improvement wouldn't happen within 5 years, but they could at least start those conversations, the planning process, going after funding, et cetera. So I don't know if anyone has thoughts on that.
Carly, is it fair to say that we've kind of established our 5-year near-term improvements through the grant applications and the ATP planning that we've done? Does that give us a good understanding of 5-year near-term improvements?
Well, the ones that have already been selected, I would say are already underway. So I'm more thinking in the next like future 5 years, if there's any other ones that you would like them to go after in like next funding rounds.
Okay, and this would probably take the form of sidewalk gaps, connections.
Yeah. So for instance, we heard, and I'm not trying to put this in anyone's head, we heard Airport Way from Church to River Road is, you know, a least favorite spot, but from Church to Liberty Island was a favorite. So if the working group felt finalizing that connection all the way to River was a priority area that you want to close that gap, that's something that could be identified. Or if you really felt that discussing with Caltrans, you know, wherever it is, if there's other areas in the downtown section that you feel should be focused on, then we can include those things.
So known gaps, known problems.
Oh, one is Church to, let me think about it, Church to St. Francis. And I think the city's already working on a number of projects, but that's a priority.
Church to
I'm
St.
sorry,
Francis?
Church, what do you mean?
Do you mean
Airport.
airport from
Airport.
Church to St. Francis?
Church
Okay.
to- Yes.
Um,
I mean, I think they're actually connecting it to Norman Richards.
Richards,
But if you're
or,
thinking
yeah,
about
Richardson.
grants and whatnot, that's the
Mhm.
section we really, I know that Robin's been working on that hard.
and the
Okay.
city property is in that location. and
That's correct.
Of course, we're anticipating that it will go out for some type of RFP for development, and at that point, we'll make it a requirement that that frontage be constructed. So that's probably a section that we'll be able to pick up through future
Development. Okay.
But
And then that-
identifying it as a priority is great, and you know, so.
And then I think that other priority that is being worked on, but again, it's a funding priority is the easement across the Triguero property next to Egbert Field coming down. That'll make it far safer travel from the north to the south. You know what I'm talking about?
Is that,
Okay.
that's from St.
You have a dotted
Francis?
line.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the drainage way. in
That's
essence.
correct.
Yeah,
Okay.
and that will get you from St. Francis to,
To the
Pretty close.
promenade.
exactly, okay.
All right. Well, if that is all, and there's nothing else that jumps out, I think I just have one more slide and it's really our next steps. So we'll update based on what we discussed tonight, identify some of these in the general plan circulation element, and we will also add some funding opportunities to help assist with planning or implementation of these improvements in the future. I think that's all I had.
Great. Thank you, Carly. Any last questions before we let Carly get on with her evening? All right. Thanks much.
Thank you all. Have a good night.
Okay. The next item that we're going to go over is the public facilities and services element. Staff is now working internally on this element. But it's sounds almost like a rather dry technical element, but in fact, this is the way you touch residents most directly. It's the services that are provided, the water service, the sewer service, all those things that the community relies on, solid waste management, police, fire, potholes. I mean, those are the things that we always hear in elections is we'll fix the potholes, we'll get more police. These are the things where you really touch your community. And so this is actually a fairly complex element. The general plan team is working with city staff in engineering, public works primarily. And we're going to be bringing forward a draft of the next meeting of the working group. So what we wanted to do was just give an overview, make sure that we're thinking about the right subjects. And so we're going to talk about the various elements or the various facilities and services within this element. The first thing is, we generally look at these in three categories. One is those services and facilities where the city owns and operates, the ones that are directly under our control. There's a next tier that's also very important where there's an independent agency that we work with. So we don't really have control over theirs, but they're still very important to the community and we may want to make a statement about those in the general plan. And then there's private entities that are providing some of these services. So those are the three categories that we break facilities and services into. First one is those city facilities and they can be divided even further. Sometimes we refer to them as the undergrounds or the wet utilities, water, wastewater, drainage. And those are critical. They're not sexy, they're not fun, but they have to work. And so we are going to be talking about things like transferring the flows from the beach wastewater treatment plant to the Northwest wastewater treatment plant, and how is that going to be accomplished? Facilities include parks, community buildings, and I realized as I was sitting here this evening, there's one big mistake or one oversight, which is the airport. So that is a facility. That's a city facility that we own, we operate, and so we need to talk about that, and that will be added in. And then there's all of the services. Right now, fire and police, road maintenance, but I think there's increasingly going to be an emphasis on recreation programs. I know that we're just kind of getting started on understanding what a revived recreation program in Rio Vista will look like, but that's certainly one of the big programs in many cities and, a service that you offer to the community. So these are all those things that are under the control of the city. Aside from airports, is there anything that comes to mind that we should be looking at that's not on this list? Okay, then I'm going to roll on to the next slide, which is those independent agencies. And the big one here is schools. It's so important to the community, and we do want to work in collaboration with schools, but we do not control schools. We can only support them. We don't pay for schools. We don't build schools. All we can do is plan with them and try to accommodate and try to support them. But there are limits to what we can do as far as schools go. There may be opportunities the working group comes up with for collaborating with the school district more, or programs or shared facilities and things like that. So we'd really like to explore those opportunities where there's a nexus. Shared park facilities and school athletic facilities is a really common one because you don't have to build a park and a playground. You can sometimes make them work together. That's been more challenging in an era of school shootings, and schools have tended to want to close their space down.
The city and the school district are already working on a joint use agreement
Okay,
for exactly what you said. So
great.
it's coming pretty soon, I'm sure.
Okay, so there may not be much we need to do to address in the general plan other than just acknowledging it. Then some of the other agencies we work with are county entities. There's the Solano Airport Land Use Commission, but there's also the health department that does certain services within the city. They're not really much of a significant subject in the general plan. It's good to acknowledge them, but we really won't be influencing how courts and health departments are operated. And then Solano Transportation Authority, STA, is an important agency that we interface with. So
What about sheriff's office?
I need to better understand our relationship to the sheriff because my understanding is we're under contract, right? So I think of us as having a police department,
Yeah.
but of course we're interfacing with the sheriff and the provision of that. So I'm not sure whether I would call that a city service or we'll explain that within the general plan that the service is provided under contract. Sure.
Would the Coast Guard somewhere be mentioned in this somewhere?
Well,
I mean, I don't know that we interact with them that much, but they're here.
Certainly they're involved in search and rescue on the river. I'm not nearly as aware as you all are of our relationship with the Coast Guard or whether they base out of Rio Vista, but is it really significant relationship to our services? I wasn't aware that it was, but
I think another one, Solano County Library. They operate the library, which is certainly an important public facility.
thank you.
And back under independent districts, shouldn't we consider Highway 12 an independent district
Yeah,
with
Caltrans.
Caltrans?
It's an empire. Well, Caltrans would be the agency,
It's
so
the-
it's not
it's
the
the death
facility
row.
itself, it's the agency, but they're certainly,
But they kind of operate independently of us for the most part.
no, and yes, that's a common situation where you have state highways coming through cities and Caltrans will dictate certain things about how that road is operated, improved, such. So, yes, good call.
And another thing, what about Sandy Beach? How should that be included in this?
That's county.
It should be, that would fit well under the county, Sandy Beach, because that's really, that's one where I think we take a lot of pride and have a lot of.
I guess this is County Park.
It is, but it's still kind
Yeah.
of here and independent,
Yeah.
I guess.
Do you consider the promenade as a park?
We identified it as, I think, a community facility in the
Mm.
Parks and Recreation element, so we acknowledge it, but we don't call it a park per se, but it's one of those features. I'm keeping up here. Okay, anything else on these supporting districts outside agencies?
Does the Delta Commission play a role at all as we look at developing waterfront and their final say on what gets to impact the river or not?
The Delta Protection Commission is more concerned about what's identified as the primary delta zone, and our waterfront is not the primary delta zone. It's that area north of Airport Road. But I think that there will be a discussion of entities like the Delta Protection Commission, Delta Stewardship Council, and any other regulatory agencies in the land use element like to talk about that, because there are instances, in fact, the general plan has to be reviewed by the Delta Protection Commission, so.
How comprehensive does this list have to be? I mean, for instance, we're on Cap Solano. I know that Stanish is on the mosquito abatement, and I mean, do we want us to list all of those, or this is just general?
I would really focus on how it more directly affects the communities. And in that case, I would see Cap Solano as having potentially a more direct effect because there are services that,
Right.
that could support the city. The mosquito abatement district, I think they're going to go about their business. Is there any way that we have to do anything to support the district, or?
Well, we don't have to support the district, but they do come here and
Right.
abate mosquitoes.
Um,
I mean, you can list it, I guess it won't
Let's-
hurt.
yeah.
We don't want Zika.
Yeah.
No. Mosquitoes are the #1 killer of anything in the US, in the world.
Hmm.
No other animal other than
Makes sense.
mosquitoes. They kill more people every year.
Mark,
And I
That's-
think it's
that's-
important.
That's what I get out of going every
Mhm.
every month to their meetings.
Are we in a specific water district or agency, or I know we have our own wells here, but
Right.
Yeah, I'm going to have to investigate more about whether we're in a groundwater basin that is regulated yet. I don't believe we are, but let me look into that a little more.
What was the name, Tom? You had mentioned the agency. I forgot it. Because I know-
LA Water,
What's that?
LA Water.
Oh, no, that's what you said.
You
No,
know,
we're in a
that's-
water district
that's
up here,
flowing
and I
down.
know
But
that.
we aren't part of the
Right by us.
BCDC. I don't believe, the Bay and Coastal.
Bay Conservation.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't believe that reaches out this far.
No, I was more speaking of that group that's out here that monitors the aquifers
Mhm.
in the region. I forgot the name of it. I know the mayor sits on that commission.
I'll look into it.
Well, no, in Concord, you're in the Contra Costa Water
Mhm.
Agency there, so, but I don't know
Yeah,
if we're
I-
under anything like that out here or not.
Because we rely upon our groundwater, we
Mhm.
actually operate independently from outside water entities,
Mhm.
is my understanding,
Okay.
but I'll make sure I understand that fully from Robin and Cecil and Brian, folks at Joe and Murphy.
But Edwin's right, there is a group, and I don't remember the name of it either, that we're part of because of the groundwater. So it's not just us, with our own groundwater, it's all connected apparently.
So it's some type of groundwater.
Conservation or something.
That's right. I
Yes.
mean, all the entire aquifer, all the way up into Yolo County is controlled by this group, not controlled, but they monitor it. So they could, put restrictions on us as well
Mhm.
in terms of how much water we could draw.
We'll make sure to discuss that in the water section. Okay, anything else on these before we hit the next one? Okay, private entities. One is we do contract for solid waste removal, so it's a private company, but it's completely under our control, or I guess the contract is under our control. We can negotiate terms, levels of service. There are certain obligations under state law that the waste hauler must meet, and so that's a kind of a changing landscape right now. But beyond that, PG&E, natural gas service, electrical service, telecommunications come to mind as far as private services that are important to our community. We'll mention them, but we have limited influence over those private entities. Any others that come to mind?
I don't know what Travis Air Force Base uses our airport for flight training, planes at our airport. They train military pilots at our airport. I don't know if that.
Since we're going to be mentioning the airport as one of the city facilities, we can note that there. Okay, so nothing else on these. Those are the general categories that we'll be describing of public facilities and services. We want to go over the goals that we think really matter in public facilities and services and see if this captures the important outcomes or if there's anything additional. The first one is just pretty straightforward, that services are high quality, reliable, that we're able to meet the needs of the community. The second one is that services are provided in a cost-effective manner. And that becomes relevant as we look at development and development's obligation to contribute to the services and facilities, as well as how we operate our facilities and balance, maintenance and investment and care of all of those facilities. So a lot goes into effectively maintaining costs, controlling costs. The third is just that the services and facilities will be adequate at the build out of the general plan. Can we see a path that we'll be able to provide all of these facilities and services to an expanded Rio Vista community? We're planning for a city of 16,000 at this point. Will we be able to serve that community? And then the fourth is, are we working effectively with outside agencies? So that's all of those entities that we just talked about. And are we getting the best for our community that we can? Are there goals beyond those that come to mind, things that we should be striving to achieve related to public facilities and services?
Is there anything about sustainability or impact with an awareness around climate change or impact to an environment or mitigating an impact to environment?
We can have a comment on that here as well as in the natural resources, open space, natural resources element. So does that make sense? There, one of our goals in facilities is sustainability and reducing climate change. Okay. Okay, anything else? I'm not going to be able to keep you guys until 7 in this space.
They're trying really hard.
And on that note, so we're going to be working on the goals, policies and programs, and as well as the element, the intention is that we'll have a complete element first draft with goals policies for you at the July meeting, which I think is July 5th, not mistaken. July 5th, July 6th.
6.
Okay. So good, we'll have 2 days after the 4th to recover. That concludes the discussion on facilities, and Nick, you're going to take us through an overview of the open space and conservation element, and then we'll be looking for comments on that element.
Thank you, Paul. Good evening, General Plan Working Group members. So we provided a preliminary draft of the open space and conservation element for your review and feedback this evening. We're just wanting to make sure that we're reflecting, the themes and values we've talked about in our meetings and discussions with the public regarding open space and conservation in the element for open space and conservation. Next slide. This element addresses the following topics. As you probably read through, open space and scenic resources in the community, biological resources, which is a start. We also are working with PlaceWorks on the environmental documentation. They're going to have some more information to provide us as we prepare this element, but we did get a start on kind of listing out the biological resources, and we'll have some more information to add over the next month or so. We also look at historic and cultural resources in the community, air quality and greenhouse gas emissions. And again, some of that information is going to be coming from PlaceWorks, and we'll be continuing to kind of flesh out that section of the element. We also address farmland, mineral and natural gas resources. And although there isn't really any designated farmland within the city limits, we still want to address farmland, because it is such an important feature of the surrounding area and the scenic beauty of Rio Vista. So we do have some discussions on that as well. And then for water resources and water quality, we have a section addressing topics related to water resources. So before we get into this next part, we just wanted to get your feedback on the first draft we submitted to you, and wanted to see if you have any comments in any of those sections, and if we're reflecting the elements or the components of open space and conservation as you would like to see.
There was one section that kind of ended with a comma, and I don't know where it was supposed to go. It's page 7, section 7.6. Farmland and more natural gas resources. That is the last sentence.
Sorry, I'm having trouble hearing. Paul, can you repeat that comment?
Sorry about that.
That's
Can
okay.
you hear me better now?
Oh, yeah, much better now. Thank you.
Okay, so that 7.6, that first paragraph just sort of ends in a comma, and is it supposed to go somewhere, or?
Yeah, thank you. I noticed that this evening. Yes, that is that needs to continue on. So that's an error right there. We'll fix that.
Are we getting granular? Okay, on page 2, second paragraph. I think you meant to say city or seek development, I believe.
Got that.
And then the third or fourth paragraph down, the tense is wrong. It says the element along the land use, blah, 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 access to the riverfront and providing
Okay.
policies to guide. And then the sixth paragraph down, it starts with north of airport. I don't, unless this is something I'm not familiar with. I think you mean dry pasture lands, not dray.
Mhm.
I don't know. I thought it might be an ag term.
Yeah, she drive past lines.
There was
Yeah, we
also-
did provide the Word document, so if there are any things you catch and want to provide that to us, be happy to take a look. I think I caught those comments. But if you have any extra ones, we certainly like to see your edits in the document.
There was also another one, that same page, page 2, the second paragraph, it says, as indicated, no desire to annex to the city of seek development. I think it's probably supposed to be or.
Okay, thank you.
So in the future, is that the best route? So we don't waste all our time here? Just send you over, if you send over the Word doc, we could just do our quick edits and send them to you?
Yeah, that'd be fine. Be really
Okay.
helpful, actually, if we could just have that.
Okay. On page 6, first paragraph, last sentence, Rio Vista has a generally low level of sensitivity. I think we want to say Rio Vista has had generally a low level of sensitivity. But because we are sensitive now.
What is the context of that sensitivity to?
Let me see. Prehistoric cultural resources. This is your paragraph.
The sensitivity relates to the likelihood of finding those resources. And so the city, it's not that we're insensitive, it's that such resources are not likely to be found and therefore there's a low sensitivity. That may be the wrong word. Maybe low likelihood of presence.
Yeah,
would be
okay.
Better.
Yeah, that'd be good.
I don't want to say we're insensitive.
Mhm. Anything else?
I think I heard the comment that we could provide you Word versions and that you could send those comments back to us. Is that the best format? We can, if that's comfortable, if that works for the working group, we're happy to take typos and not belabor these at the meeting when they're not substantive. So we'll start circulating a Word version when the packet comes out.
Yeah, probably just set it so the edits are noted on the sidebar there or something, just,
That or track changes.
yeah, track changes,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
and either one or, something so that we can easily identify where the changes are at. So
Yeah.
track changes, if everybody's familiar with that function, is a really easy way to communicate.
I'm pretty sure Christine provided the Word document of this element with the email last week.
Yes.
So you should already have a copy of the document, not only the PDF format, but the Word format.
Okay, and we'll continue to do that in the future. So
Mhm.
if anybody would like to just submit more lengthy typos, not that I'm expecting it, Judith. You're our proofreader.
Yes.
So maybe we can focus on the higher level. Have we captured the themes? Is the tone generally right? Are we understanding the conservation and open space issues for Rio Vista?
My only comment is that under, I think, page 9, water supply and water quality, is that the place? And I know we noted it in another piece, but in terms of bioswales or options for recharge of our aquifer, and that's just good citizenry, because I know that a presentation to council talked about how the swales would actually be recharging Contra Costa versus Rio Vista. But it still seems like it would be the right thing to do, that when we have development or when we're talking about water supply or setting up parks, that we should consider that. There should be consideration to that.
How much investigation of the feasibility of that form of recharge in Rio Vista has occurred? Because I've heard some comments that it will be challenging to actually get efficient percolation because of our soils.
Yeah, it's slow for sure, but I mean, I think in Pleasanton, it's just the types of plants that are planted around. I mean, if we north of airport, we had talked about there's not going to be residential there any longer, right? But there's potential for parkland. And so if we're to do that, I would like to take into consideration bioswales or some way of capturing. I think we are capturing the water just naturally. It just flows into ponds, but we could make them more appealing and make them more accessible for bio recharge or for aquifer recharge.
Okay, and I heard two comments. One is getting the recharge, but then also making them attractive. So,
Well, I think it's one and the same. I guess in my reading, which isn't very much, but in my reading, I guess there's certain plants that will allow better percolation.
Okay.
And versus just a mud hole. For instance, I'll give a good example. On airport, we have the new storage facility out there. And I think we need to put fencing around. I mean, they have fencing, which was a requirement, but they aren't covering it. So it's just a big dirt pit now if you drive by it, and it's pretty unattractive.
yeah,
On
River.
That's correct. I'm talking about the retention pond on River Road.
The new storage one.
Yeah, it's pretty hideous. Right.
vegetation on the edges of that basin will fill in, so it'll be less visible, but that basin actually is an example of one of the problems. It's not perking. So it should have drained much faster than it has. And so that's, kind of an example that some of our areas of the city don't drain as fast as we would expect. Okay, so we've got the bioswales, groundwater recharge. Other big thoughts?
Can't read my writing, so no.
Can we expect that we'll get some Word documents with edits? Okay, great. Good. Please, Christine, would you like those distributed? If you could direct those to Christine and she'll share them with us. That would be fabulous. Well, I think at this point, we are rounding third and heading for home. So I'm impressed. So we are going to be working on finishing the facilities and services element. We're also swinging into economic development. We're working with Pam on economic development and starting to extract out of a draft strategy that's been prepared for the city and look towards the goals and policies and programs. So we hope to have that for the next meeting, and that will be on July 6th. Chair, that's all that staff has in our presentation.
You also
So-
have down here Delta Protection Commission.
Yeah, I wanted to just provide a brief update. We, I believe, have reached conclusion with the Delta Action Commission, and it's not entirely satisfying, but it seems where we're going to land is no residential uses, no new residential designations on the north side of Airport Road. We had originally anticipated residential in some of the lands from St. Francis, I think, heading north. That relatively quickly came off the table, but as we discovered, that wasn't such a loss because that land is owned by the state Department of Water Resources, and probably we never would have seen it develop. But now the commission also took issue with the residential that's on the river side of St. Francis. So that would be between River Road and St. Francis. Right now, there's light industrial uses and some boat and RV storage, and particularly take issue with residential uses in the primary zone. So that's something they push back on hard. The rest of the industrial uses, they're just backing off and saying they're designated, we'll leave those alone. So there is currently industrial land on the north side of Airport Road, generally around, I want to say around Church. It's the Airport Road self-storage and then towards the river from them, that they're fine with that. They're fine with us designating all the land for the wastewater treatment plant as public, quasi-public, and recognition of that facility. They're fine with us applying an open space designation to our landfill and would be really excited to see us do recreation. So going through this process, I'm learning a few things. One is the commission's really sensitive about residential in the primary zone. And I think that comes from a lot of agencies always banging on them saying, we want to build more houses and we want to do it here. So they're drawing a hard line there. Recreation, they really favor. So as we think about doing recreation out on the north side of Airport Road, certainly on the city landfill site, but maybe other areas, I believe that they would welcome that. So that's where we've landed. And at this point, I think we've concluded our discussions with the Delta Commission about land uses. I don't believe are going to oppose us converting the study area zone that's next to River Road and extends away from the river. They understand that will be a combination of industrial and residential. They're fine when it's existing residential. They're not giving us a hard time about that. So there's I think it's a mobile home park and some single family homes and some apartments. They will be designated residential. So that seems to be the outcome with the Delta Protection Commission. And with those adjustments, I believe they'll find our general plan land use map to be consistent with the Delta plan. So that was nice to, I believe, to get to conclusion with the commission. So.
I have a comment on the writing of the draft economic development goals. Is it going to be done in tandem with the report that we still haven't seen?
Yes, and there was an interesting circumstance of that report is the form that the consultant provided it to us was not easily utilized. And so we have now converted it into a Word document that can be restructured, edited out, lift stuff out. And that's what we're starting right now, is to look for the best portions, the best ideas, the goals, actions, and such.
Well, for us, we probably want to see that report beforehand too.
I will, if you would like to see it
Because you're
before-
going to be extracting things out, but we may review it and find other things that might be pertinent or valuable.
I think in that case, we won't be bringing anything forward to you at the next meeting on economic development, just because I don't think Pam's in a position to get that report in a condition that she's ready to share. So it got stalled in because of this conversion issue, and I think Pam's now going to be able to move forward. So we'll hold off on economic goals, policies, and programs as far as presenting to you. We are still going to be reviewing that document, getting ideas out of it, but eventually the commission is going to have, the council is going to have to bless that document as your strategy. And so we don't want the cart too far ahead of the horse. Or maybe you can let the general plan guide the strategy. Well, yeah. We do need to get it moving though. So we're still trying to get to a complete draft general plan in, midsummer. That's what we're looking at. Relatively soon. In fact, we've started formatting elements in the final format to, see what they'll actually look like. And as we get 3 or 4 of those elements completed, we'll produce some binders for you that will then have the elements themselves, and you'll be able to start reading and turning pages back and forth and get a sense of what this document's really going to look and feel like. What's that? When did we start this process? We really kicked it off then. Yeah. So. Yeah, but we now have a good head of steam. We spent a fair amount of time with outreach and trying to get the community involved, so. But we are moving on the elements. That's all I have, sir.
Anybody have anything else they want to toss out? Okay, much to Paul's dismay, it's not 7 o'clock yet.
Wait
Meeting's
a second,
adjourned.
I have another report.
Too late.